She was just a waitress at a billionaire's gala, until the arrogant guest dared her to dance. What happened next silenced the room, shattered the spotlight, and set her entire life in motion. The ballroom shimmered like a jewel box, lit by the warm fire of 1,000 crystal facets. Gold accents gleamed across the towering ceiling, and a soft symphony of strings floated through the air like smoke. Waiters in black waistcoats glided between tables topped with imported roses and polished silver. Every guest, politicians, celebrities, oil barons, and tech tycoons, wore an expression that said they belonged here. Mirabelle Cooper did not. She adjusted the tray of champagne flutes balanced in one hand, her fingers aching from the weight. The thin soles of her shoes offered no cushion against the marble floor, and her black slacks, though pressed, were a size too tight from the uniform bin. Her hair, neatly pulled into a bun, was starting to frizz at the temples from the August humidity sneaking through the tall windows. Still, she moved through the glittering crowd with practiced ease, invisible but alert. She watched the micro-interactions, the eye rolls behind forced laughs, the toasts offered without meaning. She'd worked enough of these events to know. The richer the room, the emptier the conversation. "Careful, sweetheart," a drunken hedge fund manager slurred, catching the edge of her tray and steadying it with his thumb. "Wouldn't want to spill on the senator's shoes, would you?" Mirabelle smiled the way she'd been trained. Just enough to look apologetic, not enough to seem sassy. "No, sir." She walked on. Her feet carried her toward the far side of the ballroom where a small raised platform held the jazz trio. Their music was the only genuine thing in the room. Plucked bass notes and soft cymbal brushes layered under the rising hum of the gala. Mirabelle caught herself moving slightly to the rhythm, hips swaying, her steps unconsciously syncing with the beat. It was an old habit. Her body still remembered a life she'd given up. Someone noticed. "Hey, did you see that?" a voice said, loud enough to break through the music. A cluster of guests near the dance floor turned. At the center stood Chase Hills. Tall, striking, and obnoxiously confident. Chase wore his navy tuxedo like a costume he was born into. The son of a shipping magnate turned tech mogul himself, he was the sort of man who referred to money as liquidity and called private jets time savers. Tonight, he held court with his usual entourage. Other startup CEOs, a supermodel girlfriend scrolling on her phone, and a PR agent who never stopped smiling. "She's dancing," he said, pointing his glass toward Mirabelle. Mirabelle paused, unsure if he was speaking to her. "I said," he repeated, louder this time, "you've got some moves." Didn't know waitressing came with choreography. Laughter rippled through the group. Mirabelle's chest tightened, but she didn't stop walking. She didn't even look up. "Oh, come on," Chase said, following her with his eyes. "You've got rhythm. You ever think of dancing in something more upscale than a dining hall?" More laughter. A camera phone clicked. Mirabelle kept walking. But Chase wasn't done. He turned, motioning toward the jazz band with a flair that bordered on theatrical. "Play something slow. Let's see what the staff's got," he called out. The trio hesitated. A few guests clapped awkwardly, thinking this was part of the entertainment. Chase looked back at Mirabelle, eyes gleaming with mischief. "I dare you," he said, raising his voice so the entire section could hear. "Dance. Right here. Show us how it's done." Gasps. Nervous giggles. The PR agent stopped smiling. Mirabelle froze, standing in full view now, tray still in hand, flushed cheeks burning under the ballroom's gold light. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Chase grinned, clearly pleased with himself. "Too shy," he teased. "Come on, it's a party. Don't tell me the help can't have a little fun." His words hung in the air like smoke, insult wrapped in faux charm. Mirabelle set her tray down slowly on a nearby table. The room fell silent. She looked directly at Chase, her expression unreadable. And then, she stepped onto the dance floor. For a second, it felt like time itself hesitated. Mirabelle stood at the edge of the polished dance floor, her waitress uniform starkly out of place against the sea of silk gowns and designer tuxedos. The musicians glanced at one another, uncertain whether to begin. 100 pairs of eyes, full of equal parts amusement and curiosity, watched her like she was a novelty act at a circus. Chase Hills leaned back against a marble pillar, sipping his drink with the smug air of a man who believed he owned the moment. And maybe until that second he did. Mirabelle's hands trembled slightly as she slid off her black serving vest and folded it neatly over a nearby chair. Her name tag clattered softly against the wood. She reached up and undid the tight bun that had held her hair back all evening. Dark waves tumbled down past her shoulders, softening the hard lines of exhaustion around her face. She stepped forward and nodded once at the band. The pianist raised his brows but complied. His fingers dropped into a bluesy melody, slow and smoky, with the bassist and drummer sliding in behind him like a shadow. It was a tune meant for midnight, not marble halls. A tune that didn't care if you wore Louboutins or scuffed Waitress shoes. Mirabelle closed her eyes, took one breath, and moved. She didn't dance the way people at galas did. Polite, posed, performative. She danced like the music lived in her bones. Every motion was liquid, deliberate, connected to something deeper than the moment. Her hips rolled to the rhythm, her arms slicing through the air like silk. She turned, pivoted, then spun into a stretch that left her toes just grazing the floor, her balance unshaken. It wasn't just skill. It was fire. A hush fell over the crowd. Laughter died on lips. Champagne glasses lowered slowly as eyes widened. One man dropped his phone trying to record. Someone near Chase whispered, "Who the hell is she?" She danced like the floor was her sanctuary, not their stage. Like she belonged there. Chase watched, the ice in his glass melting, a flicker of something foreign creeping into his expression. Discomfort, maybe. Awe. He didn't move. No one did. Mirabelle let the music guide her into a final sweeping arc, then dropped to one knee in a sharp finish, her hand slicing the air like a curtain call. Silence. And then applause. Loud. Scattered at first, then swelling into full, roaring recognition. A standing ovation from the same crowd that had just moments ago been amused by her supposed humiliation. The musicians grinned behind their instruments, playing the final chords with new energy. Even the waitstaff, tucked along the ballroom edges, were clapping. Mirabelle rose calmly, eyes still steady. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She simply turned, walked back to her tray, picked it up, and resumed her route like nothing had happened. The clapping faded. The conversations restarted, but now centered around one question. Who was that waitress? And somewhere in the back of the room, a young reporter from a culture blog was already uploading the video. The room hadn't quite recovered. Though the jazz band had returned to their background melodies, though champagne was still being poured and glasses still raised in hollow toasts, the atmosphere had changed. There was a crack in the smooth surface of the evening, a jolt in the rhythm of high society. The gala, once predictable in its procession of speeches, auctions, and gossip, now had a story, and she was it. Mirabelle walked with her tray once more, gliding between guests as though nothing had happened. But this time they parted for her. Not obviously, not rudely, but they moved slightly, respectfully. No longer the powerful ignoring the help, but people making space for someone who had briefly commanded them all. She could feel their eyes on her. Some were curious, others embarrassed. A few stared openly, mouths slightly open as if seeing her for the first time. One woman in a sapphire dress whispered to her husband, "Do you think it was planned? She must be a performer they hired." "She's a waitress," her husband replied, eyes following Mirabelle. "Wasn't even part of the program." They didn't know she heard. They didn't know Mirabelle had been trained her whole life to listen while pretending not to. Behind her, at the edge of the ballroom, Chase Hills had grown noticeably quiet. His entourage was unusually subdued. The supermodel girlfriend scrolled on her phone, pretending disinterest. The PR agent looked vaguely panicked, as though something had escaped the script she was paid to manage. "Who is she?" Chase asked, mostly to himself. His voice had none of its earlier bravado. He looked across the room at Mirabelle, who was now offering champagne to a group of donors, her movements poised, detached. Not cold, but unreachable. Like someone who had already moved beyond the moment. "I don't know," murmured the man beside him. "But she just outshone your entire career." The comment stung, and Chase didn't bother to hide it. He turned away. At the back of the room, near the catering entrance, Mirabelle ducked behind a curtain to catch her breath. The dim hallway felt blessedly quiet, smelling faintly of dish soap and lemon polish. She leaned against the wall, heartbeat still pounding, not from fear, not anymore, but from adrenaline. She had done it. She had danced. Not in the privacy of her bedroom. Not in the shadows of the studio she could no longer afford. But on a floor filled with the most powerful people in the city. She had stepped into a lion's den of ego and excess, and turned it into a stage. But she hadn't done it for them. She did it for herself. For the girl who still lived in her skin. The one who used to stay after ballet class long after the others had gone home, practicing in the mirror until her toes bled. For the girl who had watched her dreams dissolve the day her mother was diagnosed, when every dollar had to go toward medication, not additions. Mirabelle pulled out her phone from her apron pocket. 27 missed messages. Group chats exploding. A text from a friend. "Mirabelle, you're going viral." They filmed it. "It's everywhere." Her stomach dropped. She hadn't thought about that. Not really. She clicked a link and saw her own body appear on screen. Twisting, arching, dipping to the music under the golden lights. There were already hundreds of comments. "Who is this woman? Hire her. Immediately. Waitress? Nah, she's a queen." The way the room goes silent? Chills. Mirabelle stared at the screen, thumb hovering above the lock button. She'd never wanted to go viral. Never wanted her life dissected by people who didn't know her story. But as she stared at her own face mid-turn, caught in a moment of undeniable power, she realized something. This moment wasn't going back in the box. She couldn't disappear again, even if she wanted to. Back in the ballroom, Chase Hills still watched the crowd buzzing with a mixture of confusion and admiration. But the woman they were buzzing about? She was already walking away from the chatter. Because Mirabelle Cooper had nothing to prove anymore. She already knew who she was. The rest of the world was just catching up. The music had returned to its usual volume, but the room was far from normal. The gala had taken a sharp turn. Less champagne-fueled small talk, more electric whispers passing like wildfire between sequined shoulders and velvet lapels. The ripple of Mirabelle's performance had reached every corner of the ballroom. She had thrown a stone into still waters, and now the elite, used to controlling every narrative, were scrambling to catch up to a story that had slipped through their perfectly manicured fingers. Some guests speculated aloud. "She must be classically trained. Do you think she's trying to get discovered? No way that wasn't staged. No one dances like that without years of experience." But the waitstaff knew the truth. Mirabelle hadn't done it for fame or show. She hadn't performed. She had released something. And now that it was out there, it pulsed in the air like heat after lightning. Everyone felt it, even those who couldn't name it. Across the ballroom, Chase Hills stood alone now. The circle around him had dissolved. Some too embarrassed to stay, others simply bored now that the spotlight had shifted. His untouched whiskey glass rested on a side table, the ice long melted. For the first time all evening, he looked genuinely unsure of what to do. He had expected applause when he issued that dare. Expected to be the clever millionaire who turned a servant into a joke. Instead, the joke had turned into a legend, and he had played the fool. He replayed it in his mind. Her stepping onto the floor, the way the room held its breath, and most of all, the way she had looked at him, calm, unshaken, and utterly unbothered by his arrogance. Like he was background noise. It stung in a place he rarely acknowledged. "You all right?" asked his PR agent, approaching with a cautious smile. Chase didn't respond right away. "Who is she?" he asked again. "We don't know. She's not on the guest list, obviously." "I didn't ask if she was on the list. I asked who she is." The agent hesitated. "We're looking into it. Some people already uploaded videos. Twitter's running with it. TikTok too." Chase scoffed softly, running a hand through his hair. Great. Another viral moment. She's not tagging anyone. Not making a statement. Just back to work, the agent added, glancing over at Mirabelle, who was calmly setting down a tray of empty glasses near the kitchen doors. That puzzled Chase more than anything. No gloating. No attention-seeking. Just silence. Like she didn't care that she had just stopped an entire room full of millionaires in their tracks. He found himself walking toward her. Not to gloat. Not to mock. But because something inside him itched with a need to apologize, something he hadn't felt in years. Mirabelle saw him coming before he opened his mouth. I don't need your approval, she said simply, placing her empty tray on the sideboard. He paused, caught mid-step. I wasn't. She turned to face him, arms folded. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were knives. You tried to humiliate me in front of your friends. I danced because I chose to. Not because you made me. There was no anger in her voice. That almost made it worse. She wasn't trying to scold him. She was simply telling the truth. And the truth had never hit him so hard. I didn't know you were. Talented? Educated? Worthy of being treated like a human being, she asked. What exactly didn't you know? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Mirabelle didn't wait for him to finish. She picked up another tray and turned away, heading toward the back of the ballroom. For a man like Chase, used to being the center of attention, the architect of every outcome, there was no greater punishment than irrelevance. And in that moment, Mirabelle made it perfectly clear. She didn't need him. Not his praise. Not his apology. Nothing. Still, something in Chase shifted. Not in a grand, movie-ending kind of way, but in the small, significant flicker of recognition that came when a man saw himself clearly, for maybe the first time. He stood in the middle of a glittering ballroom full of peers and power, but all he could see was the waitress who had made the world stop with a single dance, and walked away like it meant nothing. Because to Mirabelle, it hadn't been about them. It was about reclaiming a part of herself. And that, more than any applause, had set the room on fire. By morning, Mirabelle Cooper's face had been seen by over 6 million people. Clips of her dance flooded every corner of social media. Instagram reels, TikTok edits with slow-motion transitions and glittering captions like Queen Energy. She didn't dance, she ascended, and when the waitress becomes the main event. Music blogs called her a mystery talent. Influencers speculated she was a plant, an actress, a former pro. But none of them knew her. The truth was quieter. She had woken up at 6:45 a.m. like she always did, fed her mother oatmeal, and walked their neighbor's dog for a few extra dollars. Her phone buzzed nonstop, the screen lighting up with friend requests, news alerts, messages from people she hadn't heard from in years. Still, Mirabelle stood in front of her apartment's cracked bathroom mirror, brushing her curls out slowly, as though the world hadn't shifted. She looked tired. Her back hurt. Her feet ached. Nothing about her life had changed, except now, strangers thought she was exceptional. They were only half right. 13 years earlier. At age 10, Mirabelle had been accepted into the Westbrook Conservatory of Ballet, the youngest dancer to ever earn a full scholarship. Her teachers described her as gifted beyond her years. She trained 6 days a week, sacrificed birthday parties, weekends, and childhood dreams in favor of pirouettes, calloused toes, and perfect posture. By 16, she was being scouted by 2 national companies. One audition away from New York, from greatness. And then her mother collapsed at the grocery store. Stage 3 kidney failure. No insurance. No family support. Mirabelle didn't even hesitate. She dropped out of the academy, started working full-time at a bakery, and never stepped foot in a dance studio again. By 18, she had become a live-in caregiver for the woman who had once sacrificed everything for her. Ballet, she told herself, was a luxury. Survival wasn't. Still, her body never forgot. She danced when no one was looking, in kitchens, in hallways, in the aisle of the laundromat while the dryer spun. Her muscles remembered the movements like lullabies. Her soul, though battered, still responded to music like oxygen. But dreams put on hold long enough start to feel like myths. Until last night. Now, sitting on the edge of her bed in worn pajama pants, Mirabelle opened her email for the first time that morning. Subject lines blurred together. Interested in representation? We'd love to feature you on the front page. Scholarship opportunity, urgent. Netflix docuseries? She exhaled. It was too much. Later that day, Mirabelle took her mother to the clinic. The nurse waved at her in the waiting room, whispering, "You're famous, you know," and held up her phone with a smile. Mirabelle chuckled softly. Just had a good night. When her mother saw it, she immediately asked, "Was that really you dancing on the internet?" People at dialysis were passing around the video. Mirabelle sat down and gently squeezed her mother's frail hand. "Yeah, it was me." Her mother's eyes welled, clouded with pride and something else, maybe guilt. "I never wanted you to give it up for me." "I didn't give it up," Mirabelle said. "I put it on pause." "That's different." There was a silence between them, warm and tender. It wasn't filled with regret, just the fragile peace of two people who had weathered life together. That evening, a knock came on the apartment door. A courier handed Mirabelle an envelope, heavy cream-colored paper with a gold insignia. The return address: the Orlova Institute of Contemporary Dance, one of the most prestigious schools in the country. Inside was a handwritten note. "Miss Cooper, we saw the footage. We don't know your full story, but we'd like to help you write the next chapter. You have a place here if you want it. Full scholarship. No conditions. Just bring your shoes." Mirabelle read it twice, then set it down beside her. She wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. Not because she didn't want to dance again, but because this time she needed to do it on her own terms. Not swept up in a viral storm. Not because someone rich had seen her, but because she chose it. Meanwhile, Chase Hills sat alone in a glass office downtown, staring at the video he had tried to forget. He wasn't trending anymore, she was. And for once, the idea didn't bother him. He had been taught to conquer, to control, to consume. But Mirabelle's quiet dismissal, her refusal to be impressed by his money or power, had left a scar on his ego and a crack in his worldview. So he did something he never expected. He wrote her a letter. Not offering money. Not promising exposure. Just an apology. "You reminded me there's more to admire in strength that doesn't shout. I don't know where you're going next, but I hope you burn brighter than all of us." He didn't send it yet, but he kept it, because while the world saw a viral video of a dancing waitress, a moment, those who looked closer were beginning to see something else entirely. A star not discovered, but finally revealed. The first time Mirabelle stepped onto the main stage of the Orlova Institute of Contemporary Dance, she did so without fanfare. No cameras. No applause. Just the creak of polished floorboards and the gentle hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The studio smelled like rosin and effort. The mirrors, stretching wall to wall, reflected not just her movements, but everything she had become. It had been 3 months since the gala. 3 months since her dance broke the internet, unraveled her anonymity, and dropped her in the center of a storm she hadn't asked for. Journalists had camped outside her apartment. Brand offers, sponsorship deals, and influencer agents had begged for her to join their rosters. Reality shows wanted her story. One morning, she woke to find her name trending with hashtags like #TheWaitressWhoDanced and #MidnightMirabelle. But Mirabelle hadn't said yes to any of them. Instead, she said yes to Orlova. Because unlike the offers that came wrapped in lights and contracts, this one felt different. This one was real. Now, she stood in the wings of the LaSalle Theater, the Orlova Institute's mid-season performance venue, heart pounding in her chest. The hall was packed with patrons, critics, and a smattering of celebrities. For weeks, there had been rumors that the Gala girl would be making her formal stage debut. The press release confirmed it. Mirabelle Cooper, featured soloist. The curtain rustled behind her. A stagehand gave her a nod. "It's time." She closed her eyes. Not out of fear, but out of reverence, for the journey, the pain, the detours. For her mother, who now sat in the front row, dressed in a new blue scarf, and holding a tissue in her trembling hand. For the girl Mirabelle used to be, the one who watched performances from the nosebleeds, who danced between shifts, who believed the world would never make room for someone like her. The lights dimmed. The audience hushed. The music began, and Mirabelle stepped into the spotlight. This time, her dance didn't surprise anyone. It transcended them. Her movement was a love letter to resilience. Each step carved from years of sacrifice, each pirouette a defiance of every no she'd ever been handed. She filled the stage with grace and gravity, every motion infused with honesty. It wasn't just dance. It was testimony, and the crowd rose to their feet before the final note had faded. They weren't clapping for a viral moment. They weren't clapping for novelty. They were clapping because they knew this was what it looked like when a star finally stepped into the sky. Backstage, bouquets lined the corridor. Dancers embraced her. Faculty wept. And still, Mirabelle remained grounded. Calm. Not cold, but centered. She accepted the praise, the congratulations, with gratitude, but not dependence. Because her worth was never found in their applause. It had always been hers. Somewhere near the back of the theater, Chase Hill stood in the shadows, unnoticed. He had come without a camera crew or entourage. No VIP badge. Just himself and the letter he never sent. He watched as Mirabelle accepted a scholarship certificate on stage from the Orlova director. Watched as her mother joined her for a standing ovation. And he didn't try to approach. He didn't try to take credit. He just clapped. For the first time in a long time, not for himself. The next morning, Mirabelle posted a single image on her social media accounts. It was a picture of her ballet shoes, well-worn, frayed at the ribbons, resting on a stool beneath the glow of the theater lights. No caption. She didn't need one. Her story had already been told. Not in interviews, not in headlines, but in the curve of her spine mid-arch, in the pointed strength of her toes, in the way she'd made an empire of a moment meant to humiliate her. She had taken a dare and built a legacy. Not a waitress who danced. A dancer who refused to be ignored. 2 weeks after the performance at La Salle Theatre, Mirabelle found a letter in her mailbox. It was plain. No return address. The handwriting was neat but cautious, like the writer had rewritten it more than once. She opened it slowly, standing by her apartment window, light streaking across the floor in golden beams. Mirabelle, you don't know me beyond a bad joke at a worse moment. And I don't know if words can fix that. But you should know, that night changed me. Not just because you danced, but because you didn't let me reduce you. Because you didn't stay quiet. Because you made me feel small in a way that made me want to grow. I've spent a lot of my life measuring success in numbers. I'm starting to learn there are other ways. If you ever want to talk, not as a billionaire and a waitress, not as a dancer and a spectator, but as people, I'm here. Thank you for the lesson I didn't know I needed. Chase. Mirabelle sat with the letter for a long time. It didn't feel like a ploy or a script. There was no mention of deals, PR, or redemption arcs. It was quiet, real. She folded the letter and tucked it into a book of poems on her nightstand. Then she picked up her phone. Her message to him was short. Thank you for saying what most people wouldn't. I don't need anything from you, but I respect the honesty. Let's talk. Just as people. They met in the park a few days later. No cameras. Just Mirabelle in jeans and sneakers, Chase in a hoodie and baseball cap, hands shoved in his pockets like a schoolboy showing up late for detention. They walked. Talked. He asked her about dance, not just what she did, but why. She told him about her mother, the long nights working, the girl she used to be. He listened, really listened, like someone who was finally understanding how much of life he had overlooked. I don't want to fix you, he said quietly, as they paused on a bridge. I'm not broken, she replied, not unkindly. But I know what you mean. Thank you. They weren't anything yet. Not friends, not lovers, not even promises. But something had started between them, a space that hadn't existed before. Not rooted in power or pity, but possibility. Mirabelle's life was no longer ordinary, but she worked hard to keep it hers. At Orlova, she rose through the ranks quickly, not just because of her talent, but because of her discipline. The same work ethic that had once kept her family afloat now propelled her into spotlights she had only dreamed of. She danced in Paris by spring, performed in Milan that summer. By the following year, she was headlining with the Leora Contemporary Ensemble, an elite touring company dedicated to spotlighting dancers from underrepresented backgrounds. But Mirabelle never forgot where she came from. She started a fund in her mother's name, the Cooper Foundation for Young Artists, providing scholarships to low-income students in dance, music, and theater. Every performance she gave donated a portion of its profits to the fund. Not because she wanted to be known for her generosity, but because she knew how hard it was to dream with an empty wallet. Her mother's health stabilized. Dialysis continued, but the new treatment plan, paid for in full, gave her a new lease on life. She watched every performance live-streamed. Sometimes she'd cry during Mirabelle's curtain calls and say, "That's my girl. I always knew she'd fly." As for Chase Hills, he didn't vanish from Mirabelle's life. He didn't hover either. They met sometimes for coffee, for long walks. Sometimes they'd talk for hours about their lives. Sometimes they'd sit in silence, just being. He began mentoring teens from low-income communities, quietly investing in the arts without making it a marketing strategy. "I used to think I had to impress people to be seen," he told her once, watching her rehearse. "Then I met someone who was seen because she didn't try to impress anyone." She smiled at that. "Took you long enough." He grinned. "I'm a slow learner." Their relationship was slow, too. Not built on spark or whirlwind romance, but steady warmth. Mutual respect. The kind of bond born from real growth, not fantasy. He never called her his success story. She never let him. Mirabelle stood in front of a crowd of students at a free workshop in the same city where her journey began. She wore leggings, a loose hoodie, and no makeup. Her hair was tied back, curls wild and unapologetic. "You don't need a spotlight to be a dancer," she said to the wide-eyed teens. "You don't need a stage to be seen. Sometimes you just need to stop asking for permission and take up space anyway." The room erupted in applause. From the back, Chase clapped quietly. He didn't try to stand out. This wasn't about him. And Mirabelle? She wasn't waiting to be discovered anymore. She was leading, owning, living. She had taken a dare and danced. Now she was building a legacy, step by step, pirouette by pirouette, on stages the world was finally ready to give her. But only because she had already taken them for herself. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.